Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. I'm Charlene Corley, Vice President of Diverse Insights and Partnerships here at Nielsen. And today we're talking about the significant role that diverse agencies play in crafting campaigns that deeply connect with Black and overall multicultural audiences. And to join me in this conversation, we have the Managing Director of Flowers Communication Group, Jasmine Flowers Mazyck. Thank you so much for being here, Jasmine.
Great to be here. Thanks so much, Charlene.
Great. Flowers Communications Group is an award-winning integrated marketing communications firm with over 30 years of experience, specializing in PR, advertising, and integrated marketing strategies, but more importantly, known for creating purposeful connections between diverse consumers and some of the world's most iconic brands, from nonprofit organizations, governments, and key influencers. So we're so happy to have you and your expertise for this discussion.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, we were going to jump right in because we recently released our latest Nielsen Diverse Intelligence series on the Black audience, and authenticity among the Black community really is key. One of our findings from that research was, the need to capture more of our authentic nuance and experiences across the Black and African American experience. In our research, we found that nearly 63% of Black Americans feel misrepresented in today's media. So I wonder if we can start by just talking about, in your work, what have you found to be most successful for connecting Black audiences and brands? And what are Black audiences looking for from brands?
Yeah, I think the Black community, and really any kind of marginalized population, ultimately want to feel seen, heard, represented, and respected in an authentic way. And so you mentioned kind of the nuances of the community. And I think the nuance component of that is really more than meets the eye, right?
Mhm.
It's the cultural aspect. It's beyond race and gender, what we typically can see. It's geography, ethnicity, language, history, traditions, and even socioeconomic. So I really think Black audiences are looking for that deeper understanding. Brands who really peel back the layers to show and represent deeper, richer, and even more truthful stories that showcase the full fabric and tapestry of the Black community, so that we're not being looked at as a monolith or singular, that, there's so many layers to us.
Ooh, you are really laying it out. I'm so glad you got into that, because one of the other findings from this recent study was, about a third of Black Americans believe brands always portray, Black people the same way in advertising. And that underscored by exactly what you just said, that when you dive deeper into how folks are feeling represented overall, when we looked at different cohorts within the community, there were varying levels of that feeling of misrepresentation, right? So we had Afro-Latinos who, 8 out of 10 said they're feeling misrepresented when they're often engaging in content, 2 out of 3 Black men, and on and on and on. So there really is room for improvement, according to, the audience ourselves. You touched on a few of the things, but I wonder if you can also just drill in on what's something that brands can do better to understand these nuances within Black audiences.
Yeah, I think so. One of the, I would say maybe one of the more kind of clear and obvious things that brands can do is really start with looking at your team who are actually working with these brands, right? I think the best source of information and perspective on a community, on the Black community, will always be from the people who identify as being part of that community. And so I think the obvious action that a brand can take is to make sure that they're building teams that are part of the community and have that experience and perspective to bring to the table. I think a misstep that some brand teams make is they're like, okay, that makes sense, and they go out and maybe hire a Black person as part of the team. But I think it's important to understand that this doesn't mean hiring one Black person is not sufficient to represent the entire Black community or provide a perspective on the entire Black community, right? It's that thinking is once again very kind of one-dimensional. And because the Black community is so kind of nuanced and multidimensional, it's important to hire a team of people that are representative of the community, but are also diverse even within that community, if you will. So thinking about LGBTQ+, thinking about gender, thinking about geography, thinking about even language, and socioeconomic factors as well. So I think that that's one thing I think brands can do to better understand, is really tap into the people and experts that are part of the community. The other thing is, I think whether you are part of the community or not, I think it's important for communicators and marketers to really be thoughtful and intentional about the type of information that they're consuming about particular communities, and specifically the Black community. Really ask yourself, are you feeding into the stereotypes, or are you challenging yourself to really look beyond kind of what meets the eye and what we tend to see in the media? I think we're making a lot of progress in that area. We're continuing to move the needle, but unfortunately there still are kind of narratives out there that tend to be stereotypical and one-dimensional as well. As I was kind of pondering this question is, what we're starting to see now is a lot of communities within the Black communities creating their own spaces. So think about, with the launch of Cowboy Carter, there's all this like raised awareness around Black cowboys and Black artists within the country industry. There's this growing awareness of Black golfers. One of the brands we work with is Eastside Golf, who it promotes the growth of the Black community within golfing. There's Black ballerina communities as well. And even from a personal perspective, my daughters play lacrosse. And if you look today, you look at the sport of lacrosse, it's primarily a white, dominated sport. And now there's all these communities coming out for, Black lacrosse players and things like that. So I think that, marketers can do a really great job of kind of digging in to these other communities that are being created to really understand all these other dimensions of the Black community that have likely always been there, just have maybe not been highlighted or identified because we so typically just kind of go towards the stereotype.
Such a great point. And two of my favorite communities within the community are Black Girl Nerds, and there's the Black marine scientist cohort on Instagram. And so, there's so many opportunities now, I think, to connect to things that aren't a part of the stereotype, but like you said, have been there all along. Nielsen audio data has shown that country music as a radio format is consistently a top format for Black listeners. But that's something that's now, having this moment in the conversation to maybe debunk some of those myths. But shout out to the Yeehaw Agenda and Compton Cowboys. Excellent points. And again, all of those things, like you said, when you dive a little bit deeper, speak to that point of authenticity. And our research found that 2 out of 3 Black Americans are willing to cut ties with a brand they feel devalues the Black community. And so I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about, what's at stake here for brands. Why is it so important to get it right when it comes to authentic representation?
Yeah, so I think that if I can start, authenticity and kind of genuine connection is important for the Black community in particular, because I think, our community hasn't always been prioritized. The connection with us hasn't always been valued, really until more recently, which, I would, give the credit to, or really not credit, but cite the George Floyd incident being the catalyst. And so I think now that brands have started to have the desire and maybe starting to see the value in the Black community and wanting to genuinely connect, the Black community is now kind of asking why. it's almost because there is that mistrust that's there. And so I think if the why stems from the purse strings, then I think brands are going to very quickly be exposed. As you mentioned, like if there's an inauthentic connection, the Black community is going to move in the other direction. But I think if it comes from a place of acknowledgement, of appreciation, and really walking the talk, kind of putting the money where your mouth is, I think that's where it feels, authentic. One of the examples that I think about is one of our clients that we work with at Flowers Communications Group, Honda, and all the work that they do with historically Black colleges and universities through their Honda Battle of the Bands competition that they've been doing for over 30 years. Now, if you think about post George Floyd, everyone has tended to kind of jump on the HBCU bandwagon, if you will. But, Honda has been doing it before George Floyd, pre-George Floyd, right? 30 years. And so now all of a sudden you see people becoming aware of HBCUs, their long kind of history in the United States, the value, the benefits, the number of Black professionals, leaders, doctors, scientists, engineers that HBCUs produce. And so now it's become more mainstream, whereas our client Honda has been doing it for 30 years. And I think that is a testament to their commitment and understanding and authentic connection and authentic purpose in what they're doing to not just promote HBCUs, but also support them, financially through, some of the awards that the band culture can win through this Honda Battle as a Bands contest.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up, as a proud FAMU alum, I love that you bring up the HBCU piece, because there are longstanding partners, right, who have been working with these, over 100 universities for years and years alongside them. And it's important I think it's important for brands who maybe are at step one of their journey to understand it's definitely not too late, but you have to have a certain level of awareness, right, that this work is not new. There's been partners and opportunities all along. And so understanding that and having the right, like you said, people in the room to have that strategy that really works and wins and takes into account that, hey, we are just starting out, but that level of respect and authenticity and genuine effort is there. And I know you brought up the impact of George Floyd, and that really was from, an example of just the power of social media to push society and justice and all these things. I think it's an example of, really the power of social media at its very best to shine a light on something that otherwise was going to go unseen. And it really did change the world. Our data and research has shown that Black 18 to 34-year-olds are more than twice as likely to use social media also to talk about their experience with brands. And, in addition to the social media space, not just, sharing your experience, our latest report also detailed, the amount of folks who said it was important to them to follow Black influencers, 41% of the total US, but over half of white Gen Zers as well. So there's all of these crossroads and communities, as you mentioned, happening on social media. Can you talk about what's important for brands to keep in mind with their social media strategy when they're going to connect with Black consumers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, when you're connecting with Black consumers on social media, one of the first things that I think about, and it's a saying that I think is everywhere at this point in time, but, it's Black influences everything. I think we have
Exactly.
in the Black community, I think we have known how much we influence and the value of our influence in music, fashion, sports, even education. And so I think that when, marketers are looking to connect with the Black community, through social media, through influencers, I think it's important to think about a few critical things. Like, first of all, do your research. Leverage, data and insights. There's lots of tools out there from a social media perspective that really help you understand and listen to, what the Black community is talking about, what the influencers are talking about, what people are responding to, maybe even, critical issues and topics of dialogue that are important for us as marketers to be aware of. So I think doing the research and understanding is very important. The other thing I would say is hire the experts, right? Partner and collaborate with Black agencies, multicultural agencies that can really help shape your journey and strategy to kind of form the authentic connections with Black audiences.
So many great points. I think you touched on just the power of, like you said, building that credibility within the community. We have some research from our Nielsen Scarborough tool that shows that Black audiences are the most likely to support brands that they perceive are giving back to the local community. So you're spot on with some of that sentiment. The data supports it. So there's a whole bunch of solutions out there. Again, you can go to Nielsen.com/Black Americans to get our latest insights and report and explore all the Nielsen solutions that can help you do exactly what Jasmine just said. But just to put it all together, the other set that really comes to mind is 59% of Black consumers were more likely to buy from brands that feature someone from their identity group in the campaign. And they'll look elsewhere if they don't see that representation and inclusion, especially in these days where it's so easy to find, different replacements or reviews, again, connecting through social media. But I wonder with the broader sort of macro discussion right now going on, so many brands and people questioning the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how do you continue to demonstrate the value of an inclusive brand strategy?
Yeah, so DE&I right now has definitely, been under attack, and there's been, a lot of questions related to how do we continue to prioritize it. And I think with that comes the topic of, or the consideration of, well, the storyline has to be related to like a business case or providing some type of value. And so I think in general we are in an era where diversity, it's not just a future projection but a very present reality. And the conversation is no longer, when minorities will become the majority. It's happening now, and brands need to, adjust yesterday, right? So when we talk about value and kind of keeping it as a priority, I think about two things. As I mentioned, one, the monetary value, which is the ROI, and two, the value in terms of the impact that you make on the community. And, there are studies, like there's a McKinsey study that talk about the ROI value in terms of, increasing the business's chances of success, retaining employees and customers, even, more diverse organizations or brands that prioritize diversity. There's, more innovation that comes out of those organizations and teams. And I think we've heard that a lot. But what I really think is important to prioritize is the value of investing in DE&I to make an impact. And you see some brands and organizations really starting to kind of reposition DE&I and kind of their CSR or ESG kind of initiatives and aligning it really with that social impact perspective, which I think is great, because I think when you position the value of DE&I around making an impact in the community and connecting with those audiences, uplifting those communities, and perhaps moving the needle on closing the gap on certain inequities, when the community does better, businesses do better, right? And so I think we've been looking at it the other way around, in that when the business has ROI, then everyone can benefit. But I think if we put the communities and the people and the value on that first, and the diverse, impacting those diverse communities and representing those diverse communities, uplifting them, I think it works the other way in terms of everyone benefits from that. So I think that's kind of how I like to look at the value of DE&I outside of just the ROI for the business.
Well, fantastic work. I want to thank you and the entire Flowers team for all the support that you're giving your clients and the work that we've even done together. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad you were able to join us. And for all of those tuning in, again, you can go to nielsen.com/Black America to learn more about all the insights we discussed here. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.